Starting with a small budget all the way back in 1998, Masahiro Sakurai would conceive a game called Super Smash Bros. At first, it really wasn't expected to be that much of a success, what with its relatively small budget stretched between development and promotion not being enough to make a massive game. But instead of loads of content, what would make his game an absolute smash hit would be the actual gameplay itself. Since with the whole fighting game genre being pretty saturated at the time, a super unique game like Smash was just the kind of game people had been looking for. Though we'll get into that later, because with Smash being such an unprecedented success, soon the game would receive an equally unprecedented following, becoming an actual phenomenon in itself. Hello everyone, this is the RPG Monger, and welcome to the beginning of the third and final season of the Fandom Files, the Buy Something series, where we all collectively dive into the nitty-gritty of each and every fandom. And considering I myself have been quite a large fan of Smash ever since I was 10 years old, this is sure to be quite the episode. So before we get too ahead of ourselves, let's start from the beginning before the beginning. Far before Smash had even been thought of, we'll go back to the arcades of the 80s, a magical place where the newly born genre of fighting games would start to grow more and more on a steady diet of quarters. You see, at first, the fledgling genre wouldn't really have much to show of itself, what with its first couple of entries being more experimental than anything, throwing a variety of concepts at the wall to see what stuck. At the time, there really weren't many fleshed out game genres at all, with arcades being more populated by games like these, and less so by games like these. But then, in 1987, taking the successful characteristics out of its predecessors, Capcom would release Street Fighter, a game that among others would not only pave the way for tons of more fighting games, but set a certain standard that many would soon follow. Not to mention, what with the game's hidden button combinations, Street Fighter encouraged people to come back and practice more than ever before, sparking a certain culture around the game that would soon boom in no time at all. Because in only a couple more years, with the genre finally beginning to attract the interests of more and more people, Street Fighter 2 was released, a game that for a variety of reasons led to an absolute boom of the genre, with it being the first to offer a selection of multiple distinct playable characters with different movesets. All in all, it was a massive turning point for the entire genre, because right after 2 came out, what was once a slow trickle of new fighting games became an explosion of all sorts of developers trying to cash in on the fighting game craze. In this period, while many of these games wouldn't spawn successful series, there would be a few that managed to be just unique enough to survive. In general, the early 90s were like a renaissance of sorts for fighting games, creating a universal standard that can still be seen today. But then, in came the late 90s, a period of time where the once booming fighting game genre quickly began to fall from public interest. You see, as the years went by, the barrier to entry for fighting games was raised exponentially. Comparatively, when the games were relatively new concepts, it was easy to grab a fighter off the shelf and play a match with someone, whether that someone had played for 10 minutes or 10 months. But in the period after Street Fighter 2, as fighting games grew more complex and specialized, casual players who just wanted to hop in with no prior experience would get absolutely bodied time and time again. The days of mashing buttons were now over. Not to mention, with the dwindling of arcades, many fighting games who hadn't been ported to home consoles began to die out as well. Of course, it's not like this period wouldn't be host to some innovation in the genre, as a few would still manage to strike gold with their original concepts, but by this point, the market had become pretty saturated, discouraging most developers from jumping in. I mean, hell, even the seemingly untouchable Street Fighter had its share of misfortune with the release of Street Fighter the movie, the game. So now, we're in the year 1999, and finally we've reached the moment you've all been waiting for, the release of Now, I'll spare you the details since I already explained them a little while ago, but basically, whereas just about all the other successful fighting games by now were all quite specialized and complex, Smash Bros. Managed to be both a much simpler game by comparison and also hold a bit of complexity under its surface at the same time. That way, not only could seasoned players of other fighting games enjoy Smash, but little Brandon getting his N64 on Christmas could as well. Plus, aside from that, the game was a crossover of of all sorts of Nintendo characters, attracting the interests of many from that fact alone. And thus, with that, the seeds for the Smash fandom had been planted, soon to sprout and explode with the next entry in the franchise, Super Smash Bros. Melee. With it only coming out 2 years later in 2001, Melee took the original Smash Bros. And improved on it in every way. Not only were visuals and gameplay improved through the capabilities of the GameCube, but overall, the gameplay just had a lot more content in general. Though wait a second, as interesting as all this history is, what about the actual community itself? When does it come into play? Well, luckily for you, this is where it all began. Since while Smash 64 would be where people had their first taste of Smash, due to the internet still being in its early stages and a variety of other factors, the community around it wouldn't really manifest itself at all, more serving as a base for when Melee was released, because among other things, Melee would mark the beginning of competitive Smash. A competitive scene that was unique, to say the least. Now, on its surface level, competitive Melee was like any other competitive fighting game, since with its newly added tournament mode, it took no time at all for small Melee tournaments to begin popping up all across the US, starting with Tournament Go in 2002. But what is it exactly that made competitive Melee so unique? Well, let me explain. Like you all know by now, when Sakurai was making these games, they were made with the idea of being accessible to everyone with simple yet effective gameplay mechanics. However, what he wouldn't factor in was how rapidly people would find ways to make the game just as, if not even more competitive than other games at the time. Because while the game didn't exactly have high-level techniques put into it intentionally, through many nights in the lab exploiting Melee's physics engine and even some tech involving a malfunctioning controller, the hyper-competitive Melee scene was born. You'd see such techniques like wave dashing, which through exploiting said engine would cause you to slide a short distance on the platform. Or how about wobbling, another exploit in the game, this time exclusive to the ice climbers, which through a series of moves essentially allows them to have an infinite combo, sometimes even leading to a KO. Though at least in that case, wobbling wasn't always legal in tournaments. But outside of all the exploits, as people kept playing Melee and discovering how the game functioned, much to Sakurai's dismay, people began to create a vast variety of tactics and combos for most of the characters, making Melee more competitive than ever before. Hell, Melee would become so competitive that to this day, its scene is still very much alive. Though let's not get too ahead of ourselves. To keep things at least semi-chronological, let's pick up where we left off. In the early years of the competitive scene, while people would begin making little tournaments of their own, things wouldn't really pick up until 2004, when Major League Gaming added Melee to some of its largest tournaments. From there, the competitive community for Smash practically exploded, with the names of those who won or even got close to winning large tournaments becoming famous throughout the entire fandom. Even when Melee was dropped from Major League Gaming in 2007, EVO, another equally large tournament series, added it that same year. So needless to say, Melee appeared practically unstoppable, with a competitive scene that only seemed to grow every year. But then, in 2008, the first and largest split in the community tore the Smash fandom in half as Nintendo released the newest installment in the Smash Bros. Franchise, Super Smash Bros. Brawl. But wait a second, why would this be a problem? Well, initially, it really wasn't. At first, when Brawl was released, every sort of Smash fan flocked to stores to buy it as soon as possible. I mean seriously, with so many new characters and content, the game was looking like a perfect sequel to Melee. And in many ways it was. Like, just take me for example. I am a bit biased since it was my first Smash game, but even today, I still find Brawl to be a lot of fun, especially the story mode. But at the same time, at least for the hyper-competitive Melee community, Brawl was pretty lacking in a number of ways. Like I said earlier, when Sakurai released Melee, while he had made the game more complex compared to its predecessor, he never could have anticipated Melee gaining such a massive competitive community. So as a result, in an effort to prevent Brawl from going down the the same path, many techniques that made Melee so competitive were completely removed or made far less viable in Brawl, making the game more appealing to those who played casually and less so to those who were competitive. And beyond all the things that would be removed, quite a few aspects would be added as well to make the game more beginner-friendly, most infamous being Brawl's, let's just say, interesting character balancing and the mechanic of tripping. Now, all of that said, this isn't to say Brawl wouldn't still have a competitive scene, as it most definitely did for a while, but considering all of these added aspects and mechanics, the game's competitive presence would definitely be strained the older it got. So in turn, after Brawl was out for only a year, the bulk of Melee fans displeased with Brawl's slower gameplay would begin to revive their competitive scene, soon managing to attract pretty sizable tournament numbers for a game that was over 7 years old. However, as an unfortunate side effect, while most people understood that it was natural for some people to prefer Brawl and others to prefer Melee, this would be the birth of the vocal minority of Melee elitists, who to the dismay of even other Melee fans would go around insulting anyone who dared to commit the transgression of preferring another Smash game to Melee. And as a result of them, a reverse situation would happen where instead of Melee fans insulting fans of other Smash games, the bad eggs within those games' communities would in turn insult anyone who preferred Melee, leading to an endless cycle of stupidity. Though moving past the Brawl era and all that garbage, now we're in 2014, when Nintendo would release Super Smash Bros. 4. Spread across the 3DS and Wii U, Smash 4 was initially received pretty positively by the community, as the game attempted to strike a balance between Melee's high-paced gameplay and Brawl's more laid-back gameplay, with just about all of the people who played Brawl moving on to the newest installment. However, what about the Melee half of the fandom? Well, believe it or not, by 2014, they were thriving more than ever before. Having made a complete recovery from a couple years ago and crawling their way back into massive tournaments like EVO, the Melee community showed no signs of stopping, even continuing to grow as Smash 4 was released. Hell, by this point, fans had come together to create a full-on documentary about the community. It really was an insane time, as even though Smash 4 was far more tournament-friendly compared to Brawl, and would go on to have a much stronger competitive scene, Melee, over 10 years old now, was practically matching it in tournament presence. Just take EVO 2015, where when comparing entrants for the new Smash 4 and the 13-year-old Melee, the number of entrants they'd received were practically equal, and as time went on, this wouldn't really change all that much, with Smash 4 slowly but surely waning the older it got. But unlike Brawl, instead of smoothly transitioning into the next game, what with Super Smash Bros. Ultimate being announced in 2018, Smash 4's competitive scene would leave a sour taste in the mouths of many with its final showing at EVO 2018. Let me set the stage. Basically, towards the end of its lifespan, Smash 4 had a bit of a balancing issue with its newest and final DLC character, Bayonetta. She'd already been nerfed once before, but as time went on, she'd managed to still remain at the top of the tier list with how powerful her combos could be. Unsurprisingly, considering a third-party DLC character of all things happened to be the strongest character in the game, without ever being fully brought down to the level of other characters, Bayonetta quickly became hated by the entire Smash 4 community, especially considering all the other games at the tournament wouldn't have this issue, with their developers being quick to nerf top-tier characters to prevent a situation like this from occurring. So as expected, when EVO 2018 began and it came time for Smash 4, it wouldn't be much of a surprise that players using Bayonetta would soon reach the top as the tournament narrowed down. However, unfortunately, instead of the tournament proceeding as normal, every time a Bayonetta would show up in a match, the crowd would boo at them indiscriminately, making the whole experience less than positive for many. In turn, once the finals narrowed down to 2 Bayonetta mains, needless to say, the crowd wasn't too happy. At first, the match seemed to be going over pretty normally with both players fighting it out, but in response to how awfully the crowd had been to them for the majority of the tournament, they'd proceed to stall the entire game until a tournament organizer issued a yellow card and forced them to get back into it. In general, while this is definitely a situation where both sides were in the wrong, overall, it was more broadly a larger symptom of Nintendo just flat out not balancing its characters as well as it could have. And in the end, essentially, this would be where the Smash 4 competitive scene would die out, what with Super Smash Smash Bros. Ultimate on the horizon. Though now that we've gotten the massive competitive side of the Smash fandom out of the way, let's talk about the two other aspects of the Smash fandom that at least recently have definitely made themselves quite apparent: the hype culture surrounding Smash and the leaks that come from it. Starting with hype culture, while not as intense as it's been in recent times, the hype culture surrounding Smash would all begin with Super Smash Bros. Brawl, as when Nintendo revealed the first trailer for the game, the trend of focusing on new character reveals began. Plus, alongside the trailer, a year later in 2007, Sakurai would create the Smash Dojo. Not much unlike future methods Sakurai would use to raise hype, the Smash Dojo was a hybrid of sorts between an official site for Brawl and a development blog of sorts where Sakurai would post weekly updates on things that would be in the game. Looking back on it now, it really doesn't seem like much, but for those clamoring for those weekly updates, it really did its job in getting people excited for the new game. And the dojo would just be the start of it all, as once Nintendo announced Smash 4, alongside replacing the dojo with Miiverse posts, they began to up the ante by an enormous amount. Now, instead of mixing in character reveals with general trailers for the game, Nintendo began to put a huge amount of focus on character reveals, creating unique reveal trailers for each and every one. And through this tactic, Nintendo had struck gold. Soon, these reveal trailers that come out of seemingly nowhere had taken the fandom by storm, making the hype surrounding them part of the experience. Though by far, while the hype around Smash 4 grew to absolutely massive levels, they were nothing compared to when Smash Bros. Ultimate rolled around. Because while Smash 4 built up its hype over the span of a year and a couple months, Ultimate managed to surpass that in only 9, with the hype generated by its reveal trailers practically taking over the internet mere seconds after the announcement. Just take Ridley for example, a character fans had been asking to be in Smash since Melee that when revealed to be in Smash Ultimate, instantly blew up any existing social media out there. Hell, even 30 minutes before the game was released, Nintendo sneakily revealed Joker from Persona 5 to be in Ultimate, once again making the internet absolutely explode. However, while hype culture has been positive for the most part, what with people being overjoyed that certain characters had made it into the games, there would also be an unfortunate side effect that would go on to affect even Sakurai himself. Enter Waluigi, a character who, originating from Mario Tennis, has always been a fan favorite due to things never going his way. So of course, when the news of Smash Ultimate washed over the internet, among the infinite sea of characters people wanted in Smash, a considerable amount of people wanted Waluigi in as well, something that was really quite harmless more than anything. But then, when Nintendo released the first, pretty sizable portion of Smash news ever since the game had been revealed to date, Waluigi fans had a shocking discovery. To their dismay, like in previous installments, Waluigi was to remain an assist trophy, deconfirming him as a playable character. To many, it seemed like all hope was lost, and despair washed over the masses. But wait, as the internet would soon see, Waluigi fans would not go down without a fight, because in almost no time at all, fans of Waluigi created all sorts of fan content, ranging from memes to full-on animations. Of course, this was all in good fun, and the grand majority of the people who took part in this fully realized that him not being playable was ultimately Sakurai's decision at the end of the day, and they respected that. Though unfortunately, when anything like this happens, there'll always be those that go and spoil the fun. As among all the Waluigi fans who were taking part in this movement of sorts for the fun of it all, there would also actually be a vocal minority of people who, get this, were not only legitimately angry with Sakurai himself over him not making Waluigi playable, but went as far as to harass the man on Twitter, being blocked in the process. Now, I really don't think I need to explain why these people were in the wrong, because I mean, you'd have to be an idiot to think that harassing the man making all this possible was a right course of action. But instead, just think about this for a second. If you want Waluigi to be in Smash Smash, then great. I honestly think most people do. But don't you think that actually harassing the man to make him playable is hurting your cause more than helping? It's not like the guy has a playable Waluigi already set up and is just withholding him from the public. There's a lot of decision making and time that goes into the addition of new characters, and quite frankly, after being harassed, you've only made Waluigi's chances far slimmer in the long run. Though that's enough talking about that. Moving on from hype culture itself, alongside all the hype, on the flip side of it all, there's the leaks and rumors that came with it. Now with any popular game series, when a new installment is about to come out, there will always be plenty of leaks, some true and some false. I mean, just take Pokemon for example. I remember seeing leaks for it all the way back in elementary school. Back to Smash though, going back as far as Melee with the Sonic and Tails rumor spread by Electronic Gaming Monthly, the massive amounts of leaks and rumors Smash has gotten to this day is practically absurd. And I won't be going over every single leak and rumor that's happened in the history of Smash, as that'd need an entire video of its own. So for the sake of this video, I'll try to cover only the more insane ones. Starting with Brawl, since it'd be the first game to really start getting leaked, while it did receive some pretty huge leaks that many ironically dismissed as trolls, by far the most ridiculous one came from an interview with David Hayter, the voice actor for Snake, who when in an interview accidentally leaked Jigglypuff before they'd even been announced for the game.
But I think it'll be really fun to just wail on Pikachu or Jigglypuff or...
Now compared to other leaks, this wouldn't rile the fandom up too much, as many had already been guessing Jigglypuff would come back, but I just couldn't resist mentioning it. On to Smash 4, alongside Nintendo's increased focus on building hype came even more elaborate leaks, both true and false. Like just take all the hoaxes for example, since through using external programs to make models near identical to the ones used in Smash, a variety of characters were supposedly leaked due to fake screenshots, with a few of them ironically being confirmed later through sheer coincidence. However, aside from every leak and rumor thus far, to Sakurai's dismay, Smash 4 would be victim to the worst leak the series had received to date, with just about all the content and the test copies sent to the ESRB being leaked in their entirety, making the fandom completely explode alongside. Though considering the ESRB leak would be the worst leak Smash had ever gotten, what was the largest rumor? Well, for that, we look towards Smash Ultimate, where with the hype for the game reaching unprecedented levels, at this point, leaks had just become part of the experience, with constant debate around whether or not they were true going at all times. And by far, among all the fake leaks spread around until now, there'd only be one that was elaborate enough to fool nearly everyone: the Grinch Leak. Let me explain. When Nintendo would reveal new characters for Smash Ultimate, they'd continuously fill in this banner right here as a nice little gimmick alongside. Now, up until this point, making convincing screenshots of new characters had already been done plenty of times, and many people just couldn't be fooled by them anymore. So instead of creating fake screenshots, the mastermind behind the Grinch Leak created an entire fake banner, supposedly revealing characters that would soon be announced in the upcoming Direct. And in only a matter of hours, this leak had taken the Smash fandom by storm. At first, many were skeptical of it all, but as more and more things began to check out, like how the original poster worked at a company that had been affiliated with Bandai Namco, a company that's linked to Smash, the fandom began to become convinced that the 7 characters revealed in the Grinch Leak would be in the game. Plus, aside from that, another reason many in the fandom took the Grinch Leak as fact is since you could see supposedly never-before-seen promotional material for the new Grinch movie, as many didn't think the mastermind would create completely new Grinch renders just for a fake Smash leak that automatically proved it true. Of course now, 2 months later, we all know that things were really just that elaborate, and once the November 1st Nintendo Direct rolled around, literally every character but Ken ended up being deconfirmed. Looking back, it all seems really ridiculous that the Grinch leak even happened, but honestly, with how insane the Smash fandom is, I'm sure that when the next Smash game comes out in like 10 or so years, we'll be getting even more elaborate leaks. So alright, before we close things out here entirely, there's one last thing I feel is important to address when talking about the Smash fandom. It's infamous infighting. Now, I already touched on the never-ending cycle of Melee elitists looking down on the fans of newer games, and newer game elitists looking down on Melee fans, but the fact that this is still going on, even as Smash Ultimate is already out, is really something else. Hell, I'm not even joking when I say that right as I was writing this segment of the video, there's been a pretty sizable member of the fandom who said that Melee fans and Smash fans are two separate things entirely. Which, I mean, come on, is so blatantly false it's not even funny. Simply put, the Smash fandom that we see today practically originated from Melee, what was Smash 64 never developing much of a community around it until later. And yes, it's no secret that ever since Brawl came out, there's definitely been a noticeable divide in the community, though in the many years since then, those times have since come to a close. So in turn, with Smash Ultimate being the best game to bridge the gap thus far, there's seriously no point in keeping up this useless war between games. And thankfully, it does seem like I'm not the only one with this sentiment, with the grand majority of the Smash fandom rallying against statements like these. Though anyways, that little rant aside, whether you're super competitive or just want to watch Kirby beat up a vicious space pirate, Smash is for everyone. I know that at least for me, even when I don't see a friend of mine for ages, when we get together and play Smash, it's like nothing had ever changed. So in the end, being in the Smash fandom is really one hell of a ride, and honestly, I wouldn't have it any other way. But wait, before any of you all go back to trying to figure out who to main in Ultimate, it's time for everyone's favorite segment, the channel update. It's been quite a while since I've done one of these in a video, and with all the changes that have been and will continue to happen with the channel, I felt it was about time I should do one. Now firstly, for those of you who don't follow me outside of YouTube, let me explain the current state of the fandom files. Essentially, as I've been making these videos for quite some time now, my outlook on fandoms and even making videos has changed a lot. I mean, hell, with me making a 40-minute video on Homestuck, that's probably already pretty clear. But alongside that, while I know a good bunch of you enjoyed them in this series and elsewhere, I've decided to not make videos about fandom stories specifically anymore. In general, it just doesn't fit my content at this point. Of course, that doesn't mean no more fandom files, but from now on, the fandom stories sent to me through my email or Twitter won't be used anymore. Seriously, thank you to everyone who mustered up the courage to send me a story. I'll still try to reply to all of you over the next few weeks. And in other news, as I'm sure those of you who've been watching me for a while are aware, every year I always try to change things up on the channel. For the past 2 years, it's been the actual channel colors themselves. But for 2019, after a lot of consideration, I've decided to change something else instead, my actual Moogle itself. So in turn, with me commissioning a new artist in 2019, I just want to give as much of a shout out as I can to the artist that quite literally brought me to where I am today. Because I mean seriously, would you be watching me right now if you had to stare at this atrocity for the entire video? I highly recommend you all go follow her on Twitter and Instagram because she seriously deserves so much more attention. So yeah, with all that said, it's time for the outro. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more like it, do subscribe, and today's cool thing of the day is the Smash is Broken series by Hugh. In actuality, I only just recently discovered this guy's videos, and I highly recommend them to anyone interested in learning more about Smash in general. I personally recommend the one on Brawl because as much as I love that game, its flaws are definitely something else. So that being said, I'm the RPG Monger, and don't forget that each and every one of you are fantastic. Fox, Final Destination, no items!